The inspection report sat on the desk like a death sentence. Director Ushvin read it for the third time, hoping the words would somehow change. They never did. The dragon children at Station Talon, 7, were failing. Not dying exactly, but not living either. Their scales looked dull under the bright station lights. They moved slowly, conserved energy, huddled together in corners. The medical scans showed they were alive. The reality showed they were barely holding on. Ushvin was old for a Drakith. His wings had lost their shine decades ago. He had run this orphanage for 20 years, watching generation after generation of dragon children pass through these cold halls. They survived. They grew. They left. But none of them thrived. None of them remembered this place with warmth. The heating system worked perfectly. The thermic engineers who designed it had shown him the data repeatedly. Temperature stayed within acceptable ranges. Energy efficiency exceeded standards. Every calculation checked out. Yet the children shivered. Ushvin heard the transport dock outside his office. Another engineer, the fourth one this year. He did not bother getting up. They all said the same things, checked the same systems, declared everything functional, then left. The human who walked through his door was smaller than expected. Humans usually were. Richard Palmer looked tired. His clothes were worn but clean. He carried a simple toolkit and a datapad that had seen better days. Director Ushvin. Rick extended his hand. Ushvin shook it, noting the warmth. Human body temperature ran hot compared to most species. You are the engineer from the commission. Last resort, more like. Rick smiled without humor. 3 firms turned this job down. I was available. Ushvin appreciated the honesty. The heating system is down the main corridor. I can show you the technical specifications. Later, maybe. Rick looked past him toward the nursery wing. Can I see the children first? That was new. Every other engineer had gone straight to the machinery. Ushvin led him through the station. Station Talon. 7 orbited a dying star in the Draken system. It was remote, underfunded, home to 47 dragon children nobody wanted. The youngest was 2 years old. The oldest was 12. All of them had lost their parents to war, disease, accidents. All of them ended up here. The main nursery was large and echoing. Plasma conduits ran along the ceiling, pumping heat through the space according to precise calculations. The temperature read as adequate on every sensor. Rick stepped inside, and his breath misted in the air. It's freezing, he said quietly. The temperature is within acceptable parameters for young Drakith. Ushvin replied automatically. He had said those words so many times they meant nothing anymore. Rick walked slowly through the room. Dragon children watched him with cautious eyes. They sat in groups, pressed against each other. The smaller ones were buried under the larger ones. They had learned that body heat mattered more than the ambient temperature the system provided that a tiny dragon separated from her group. She was the smallest one in the orphanage. Lila, for years old and half the size she should be. Her scales were pale blue-gray instead of the vibrant blue of healthy young dragons. She approached Rick with careful steps. "You are warm," she said. Her voice was quiet and rough. Rick knelt down to her level. "Yeah, humans run pretty hot. May I?" He extended his hand. Lila touched it with one claw, then pressed her small palm against his. Her eyes widened. "It goes all the way through," she whispered. "The heat. It does not just sit on top." Rick looked at Ushvin. "What does she mean?" "The plasma heating system creates ambient warmth. It heats the air around them, but it does not penetrate. It does not sink into their bodies the way radiant heat would. Like standing near a fire versus sitting on a sun-warmed rock," Rick said. "Yes." An older dragon approached. Owen, 11 years old, almost adult size. He positioned himself between Rick and Lila. "Protective." Another engineer. Owen said. It was not a question. "You will look at the machines, declare them functional, and leave. Just like the others." "Maybe," Rick admitted. "Or maybe I will actually fix something." "There is nothing to fix. The system works. We're just too expensive to heat properly." Owen's voice carried bitterness earned through experience. Rick stood slowly. He looked around the nursery again. The children watched him with the careful hope of those who had been disappointed before. He noticed 3 spots in the room where dragons clustered more than others. He walked to the first one. It was near a viewport where the system's star cast thin light. The metal floor was slightly less cold there. They seek out the sunlight, Ushvin explained, even though it provides minimal heat through the viewport. Rick moved to the second spot, a corner where 2 walls met. And here, the walls retained some heat from the corridor conduits behind them. Not much, but more than open space. The third spot was near a maintenance access panel. Rick opened it. A thermal conduit ran through the wall space behind it. The conduit leaked heat, not enough to register as a malfunction, but enough that the wall was warmer than the rest of the room. 0.6 dragons had built a nest there using reflective emergency blankets stolen from somewhere. They had tried to create a heat trap. Rick closed the panel carefully. He turned to Ushvin. I need 48 hours to repair the system, to understand what these children actually need. Rick looked at the director steadily. Every other engineer started with the machinery. I'm starting with them. Ushvin felt something unfamiliar. It might have been hope. The commission expects results quickly. The commission expects me to confirm what they already believe, that the system works and the children are just difficult to please. Rick's voice was calm but firm. I am not here to make the commission happy. I am here to help those kids. He walked back to where Lila sat. She had returned to her group, but her eyes followed him. Rick knelt again. Can I ask you something? She nodded. What do you miss most? About home, I mean, before you came here. Lila was quiet for a long time. Then she spoke in that soft, rough voice. When I was still in my egg, my mother would breathe on it. Warm air. I could feel her through the shell. The warmth felt like she was talking to me, telling me I was safe. Her eyes were distant. Here, the warm air just moves past us. It does not stay. It does not talk. Rick stood slowly. His jaw was tight. He looked at Ushvin. 48 hours. I will not touch the machinery until I understand what warmth actually means to them. Ushvin watched the human walk back through the nursery. He stopped to speak with small groups of children. He asked questions. He listened. He took notes not about temperatures and energy outputs, but about feelings and memories and what made them feel safe. For the first time in 20 years, Ushvin thought maybe someone finally understood the real problem. Rick spent his first full day sitting on the cold floor of the nursery. He brought a thermal camera, a data pad, and a blanket that he did not use. He wanted to feel what the children felt. By midday, his legs were numb. By evening, he understood why they never stopped moving. The dragons avoided him at first. They had learned that adults who ask questions rarely listen to answers. But curiosity eventually won. The younger ones approached in groups, never alone. They touched his equipment, asked what the blinking lights meant, wondered why he was not working on the machines. I am working, Rick told them, just differently. Lila was braver than the others. She sat beside him for an hour without speaking. Then she pulled out her treasure, a thermal blanket she had stolen from a supply closet 3 months ago. It was thin, metallic, designed for emergency use. She wrapped it around herself like a cloak. It does not make heat, she explained, but it keeps what little I have from escaping. Rick took a photo of her wrapped in silver, sitting in a nursery that should have kept her warm. He would show it to anyone who called this system adequate. Owen joined them as the station dimmed into night cycle. He was old enough to remember his hatching clearly. Rick asked him about it. My nest was in the deep caverns of Drakis, for Owen said. His voice carried the weight of memory. Underwater volcanic vents heated the stone. The water kept the temperature steady. My mother and father took turns keeping their wings over the nest. The warmth came from below and above. It wrapped around us. What did it feel like? Owen closed his eyes. Safe. Like being held even when you were alone. Rick made notes, not technical specifications. Words like wrapped, held, steady. He was building a vocabulary of comfort that no engineering manual contained. The thermal camera showed him what his eyes could not see. The plasma heating system pushed hot air through the nursery in efficient patterns. The air moved constantly, never settling. It was warm air, technically, but it passed over the dragons without penetrating their scales. Their core temperatures remained low. They generated some body heat themselves, but not enough. Not without help. He noticed something else. The dragons naturally formed small groups, but they positioned themselves in specific patterns. Younger ones in the center, older ones on the outside. They created shells of bodies to trap whatever warmth existed. It was instinct. They were trying to recreate the nest environment they had lost. On the second day, Rick explored the entire station. He found 3 maintenance closets where thermal conduits ran close to the walls. In each one, he found signs that dragons had spent time there. Scratches on the floor. A forgotten toy. One had a pile of reflective materials arranged like a nest. He found Owen there during evening cycle. The older dragon was curled against the wall where a leaking conduit made the metal almost warm. He woke when Rick entered, scrambled to his feet. Embarrassment crossed his face. "I was just finding what you need," Rick finished. "Don't apologize for that." Owen relaxed slightly. "The others need the nursery heat more than I do. I can handle the cold better. You shouldn't have to handle it at all." Rick sat down on the floor. The warmth from the conduit was barely noticeable to him. To a heat-starved dragon, it must have felt like treasure. "Can I ask you something?" Owen nodded. "If you could build your perfect sleeping space, what would it be like?" The question surprised Owen. No adult had ever asked him what he wanted. "My own space. Not big, just big enough for me. Warm floor, warm walls, somewhere I could curl up and feel like the heat was around me, not just near me." He paused. "And I would want to stay warm, not change when someone adjusts the system efficiency." Rick wrote it down. Then he asked the same question to every dragon in the orphanage. The answers varied in details, but matched in theme. They wanted warmth that surrounded them. They wanted consistency. They wanted spaces that felt like they belonged to someone, not just temporary spots in a shared room. Director Ushvin found Rick on the third morning, sitting in his office, surrounded by sketches and calculations. But these are different from typical engineering plans. Rick had drawn nest spaces, heat maps, comfort zones. "I thought you were going to fix the heating system," Ushvin said. "I am, by replacing it. The commission will never approve the budget for a complete replacement." Rick looked up. His eyes were tired but determined. "I'm not asking them for money. Not yet. I'm asking you for permission to try something." He spread his drawings on the desk. The current system is designed by thermics, insect-based species. They understand hive temperature, collective warmth, but they do not understand what nest-building species need. Dragons are not hive creatures. They are family units. They need individual warm spaces, not uniform ambient temperature. Ushvin studied the sketches. "What are you proposing?" "Radiant floor heating, thermal mass storage, individual alcoves with adjustable heat zones, materials that absorb warmth during high-power hours and release it slowly." Rick pointed to different elements. "I can build it using mostly existing station resources. Clay pipes for water circulation, stone tiles from the cargo bay inventory, copper mesh, basic infrared panels. This looks like ancient technology, human technology. We used it for thousands of years before we went to space. Heated floors, warm stones, water circulation. It works because it matches how our bodies experience warmth." Rick met Ushvin's eyes. "And it will work for dragons too. Because despite our differences, children who need warmth all need the same thing. Heat that holds them." Ushvin was quiet. The commission would call this wasteful, inefficient, unnecessary. But he had watched children suffer in a technically perfect system for too long. "How long will it take?" "For weeks for the main nursery. If the dragons help me, maybe 3. They will help." Ushvin made his decision. "Do it." Rick smiled for the first time since arriving. "Thank you. Do not thank me yet. If this fails, we both answer to the commission." "It won't fail." Rick gathered his sketches. "I'm not just building a heating system. I am building them a home." The nursery looked like a disaster zone. Rick had shut down half the plasma heating system and torn up sections of the floor. Dragons watched from the warm half of the room as he installed water pipes in careful patterns. The station supply officer had questioned the requisition for clay, piping, and dark stone, but Director Ushvin approved it without explanation. Lila appointed herself as Rick's assistant. She brought him tools, held equipment, and tested temperature readings with her sensitive scales. Rick explained each step as he worked. Water holds heat longer than air, he told her while sealing a pipe junction. We heat the water during low power hours when the station reactor is not busy. Then we circulate it through these pipes all day. The stone floor above it absorbs the heat and releases it slowly. Like sun-warmed rocks, Lila said. Exactly like that. The older dragons were skeptical. They had learned not to hope too much. But when Rick asked for help moving the heavy stone tiles, Owen organized a work crew. 8 older dragons lifted and positioned each tile while Rick set them in place. The work was slow, precise. Rick refused to rush. If we do this wrong, we do it twice, he said. Better to do it right the first time. By the end of week 1, the first section of floor was complete. Rick activated the heating system just before evening cycle. Water circulated through the pipes, warming them. The stone tiles absorbed the heat gradually. Within an hour, the floor was warm to the touch. Lila was the first to test it. She stepped onto the heated section carefully, ready to jump back if it burned. Instead, her eyes widened. She sat down. Then she laid flat, spreading her wings and tail across the warm stone. It goes into me, she whispered. The warmth. It goes all the way through. The other dragons crowded forward. Rick had to organize turns. 5 minutes each until everyone had felt it. Even Owen, who pretended not to care, stayed on the warm floor for his full time. His scales brightened slightly in just those few minutes. We need more, Rick said. A lot more. But this proves it works. Week 2 brought the alcoves. Rick built them into the nursery walls, recessed spaces just large enough for one dragon. Each alcove had its own temperature control. Copper mesh in the walls distributed heat evenly. The curved design reflected warmth inward, creating a cocoon effect that he built the first alcove to Lila's specifications. Small enough to feel cozy, deep enough to curl up incompletely. She climbed inside when it was finished and refused to leave for 3 hours. Her scales went from pale gray blue to a healthier azure. Her breathing deepened. She slept like she had not slept in years. The other dragons watched. Understanding dawned. They would each get their own space. A warm space that belonged to them alone. The fighting over warm spots would end. The constant competition for body heat would stop. They could rest. Rick worked 16-hour days. The dragons helped however they could. The younger ones tested temperatures, telling him warmer or cooler, until each alcove was perfect. The older ones installed the heavier components, learning as they worked. Owen became skilled at pipe fitting. A 9-year-old named Sarah learned to wire the temperature controls. You are teaching us, Owen observed one evening. You should know how this works, Rick said. How to maintain it. Fix if something breaks. This is your home. You should understand it. The concept was foreign to Owen. Adults did not teach orphans. They managed them. Why? Because knowledge is power, and you deserve both. Week 3 brought the centerpiece. Rick built it in the common area where dragons gathered during the day. A circular design with radiant heat rising from the center. Stone benches arranged around it, each bench angled to catch and hold warmth. It mimicked the communal heating spots that dragon families created in the wild. The engineering was tricky. The heat had to rise evenly without creating hot spots. The benches needed to warm without burning. Rick tested it a dozen times before letting anyone near it. When he finally activated it, the result was better than his drawings suggested. The gathering hearth became the heart of the orphanage immediately. Dragons who had barely spoken to each other sat together in a shared warmth. They talked, played games, told stories. The warmth made them social in ways the cold never had. Director Ushvin visited during week 4. He said nothing at first. He walked through the transformed nursery slowly. Half the alcoves were finished. The warm floors covered 70% of the space. The gathering hearth glowed with gentle heat. Dragons were everywhere, active and vocal and alive in ways he had never seen. Lila ran past him, chasing another young dragon. They were playing, actually playing, not conserving energy, not huddling for survival, playing like children should play. The medical scans, Ushvin said quietly. They show improvements already. Weight gain, better scale condition, hormone levels normalizing. They were never sick, Rick said. He was installing the last temperature control panel. They were just cold. Fix the cold, fix the problem. The commission inspection is in 1 week. Rick's hands stilled on the panel. I thought we had 2 more weeks. They moved it up. Someone filed a complaint about resource allocation. Ashvin did not say who, but his tone suggested he knew. They will look at the expenses, question the changes. They may order you to remove everything and restore the original system. Rick turned to face him. Behind the director, 47 dragons lived in warmth they had never known. Lila slept in her alcove, safe and comfortable. Owen sat at the gathering hearth teaching younger dragons about heat retention. They were thriving. Let them try, Rick said quietly. I will fight them every step. They have authority, regulations, efficiency standards. I have 47 children who are finally warm. Let's see which argument wins. Ashvin smiled for the first time in months. I will schedule the inspection for end of week. That give you 6 days to finish. We will be ready. That night, Rick sat alone in the dark hallway outside the nursery. Through the door, he could hear the quiet sounds of dragons sleeping, not huddled masses sharing body heat. Individual dragons in individual spaces, each one warm and safe. Some snored, some whispered in dreams. Normal sounds, healthy sounds that he put his head in his hands and cried quietly. Not from sadness, from relief. They were sleeping like children should sleep. The commission inspectors arrived exactly on time. 3 of them. The first was a thermic named Coordinator Vess, all angles and efficiency. The second was a digital consciousness called Unit 7 that projected itself through a mobile hologram. The third was an avian species, Inspector Hearth, who took notes on everything with mechanical precision. Director Ashvin greeted them formally. Rick stood beside him, wearing his cleanest work clothes. Behind them, the nursery hummed with warmth and life. We are here to assess the unauthorized modifications to Station Talon 7, Vess said. No greeting, no pleasantries, pure bureaucracy. The modifications were authorized by me, Ashvin replied. As station director, I have discretion over internal systems. Discretion has limits. Unit 7's voice was flat, emotionless, especially when expenses exceed standard allocations by 400%. Rick started to speak. Ashvin touched his arm gently. Not yet. The inspectors walked through the nursery. They carried scanners and data pads, measuring everything. Temperature gradients, energy consumption, material costs. They spent 20 minutes examining the floor heating system. Vess declared it primitive and inefficient compared to plasma circulation. They tested the alcoves. Unit 7 calculated that individual heating zones used more power than collective ambient heating. Inspector Hearth noted that the stone materials were unnecessary luxury items. Through it all, the dragons watched, silent, worried. They had learned this dance before. Adults came, judged, decided their fate without asking them. Lila sat in her alcove, scales bright and healthy. She had gained 2 kilograms in 3 weeks. Her breathing was strong, but the inspectors barely looked at her. They looked at their scanners instead. The gathering hearth drew particular criticism. Vess calculated the energy cost and declared it excessive for a common area. Unit 7 projected efficiency graphs showing how the original system used fewer resources. Inspector Hearth photographed everything with the air of someone documenting waste. Rick kept his mouth shut. Barely. The medical scans came next. The inspectors reviewed the data from the past month. Weight gain across all dragons. Improved scale condition. Better hormone levels. Reduced stress markers. Inspector Hearth read the numbers aloud without inflection. Subjects show improved physical metrics, she said. However, physical health is only one factor in cost-benefit analysis. They are children, Rick said quietly. Not subjects. Vess turned to face him. Emotional terminology does not change economic reality. Resources are finite. Efficiency is mandatory. So is compassion. Compassion is not measurable. Then measure happiness. Measure development. Measure how many of these kids will grow up healthy versus damaged. Rick's voice stayed calm, but grew harder. Your perfect efficient system was killing them slowly. My primitive expensive system is helping them thrive. Which outcome matters more? Unit 7 projected a comparison chart. The original heating system maintained adequate survival temperatures while consuming minimal resources. Current system exceeds requirements while quadrupling energy costs. Recommendation: return to original configuration. Owen stood up from the gathering hearth. He was nearly adult size, old enough to speak for himself. No. The inspectors turned to him. Ushvin looked worried. Rick stayed very still. The original system kept us alive, Owen said. His voice carried through the quiet nursery. Alive but cold. Alive but miserable. Alive but broken. He walked toward the inspectors. Do you know what it feels like to be cold every moment of every day? To huddle with others just to keep your core temperature stable? To fight for warm spots because there are not enough to go around? Emotional responses are not relevant to efficiency assessments, Vest said. Then your assessments are garbage. Owen's wings flared slightly. You want measurements? Fine. Before Rick came, I slept maybe 4 hours a night. Cole woke me up constantly. Now I sleep 8 hours. Lila ate half her food because she used all her energy staying warm. Now she eats everything and still gains weight. We used to fight over warm spots daily. Now we do not fight at all because we all have our own spaces. Inspector Hearth made notes. Unit 7 processed the information without comment. Vest looked annoyed. Individual testimony is not sufficient. Then ask all of us. Owen gestured to the other dragons. Ask every single child here if they want to go back to your efficient system. See what they say. Ushvin stepped forward quickly. Perhaps we should discuss this in my office. No. Rick moved to stand beside Owen. They want measurements? Let's give them measurements. Real ones. Not just energy costs. He pulled out his datapad. Dragon children who grow up in inadequate thermal environments show lifelong psychological impacts. Higher anxiety, lower social bonding, difficulty forming attachments. The long-term medical costs of treating those conditions exceed the energy costs of proper heating by a factor of 8. He projected his own data. I researched every dragon who came through this orphanage in the past 20 years. Tracked their adult outcomes. 40% needed ongoing mental health support. 20% had chronic physical problems related to developmental stress. The commission pays for that treatment. You want efficiency? Invest in childhood warmth and save money on adult intervention. Vest examined the data. Unit 7 processed it silently. Inspector Hearth's note-taking intensified. Rick continued. Every species in the galactic community raises their young with appropriate warmth. Thermics have hive queens who maintain precise nest temperatures. You know this matters. You just do not want to pay for it when the children belong to someone else. That is an inappropriate accusation, Vest said. Then prove me wrong. Approve the thermal comfort standards. Allocate the resources. Show me you value dragon children as much as you would value your own. The silence stretched. Unit 7 finally spoke. The data requires further analysis. We will submit our findings to the Commission Council within 7 days. What happens to the current system during that time? Ushvin asked. It remains operational pending final decision, Inspector Hearth said. She looked at the dragons, really looked at them for the first time. Pending review. The inspectors left. The nursery stayed quiet for a long moment. Then Lila climbed out of her alcove and walked to Rick. She wrapped her small arms around his leg. Thank you for fighting for us. Rick knelt down to her level. Always. That is what family does. Owen approached slowly. Do you think they will let us keep it? I do not know, Rick admitted. But I will fight them every day if I have to. Director Ushvin stood by the door, watching the human and the dragons. He had spent 20 years trying to care for these children within the Commission's rules. Rick had spent 3 weeks breaking every rule that did not serve them. Maybe that was what they needed all along. Someone who cared more about the children than the regulations. The message came 3 days after the inspection. Director Ushvin read it twice before calling Rick to his office. The Commission had denied funding for thermal comfort systems at other orphanages. The reasoning was clear. Too expensive, not necessary, efficiency standard sufficient, but they had not ordered Station Talon 7 to remove their system. A small victory, a frustrating one. They are leaving us alone, but refusing to help anyone else, Rick said. He stood at the window, looking out at the stars. 12 other orphanages requested the designs. 12 groups of children who need what we built here. And the commission said no. You cannot save everyone, Ashvin said gently. Watch me. Rick spent that night redesigning everything. If the commission would not fund it, he would make it so cheap they could not use cost as an excuse. He stripped his designs down to essentials, replaced expensive materials with cheaper alternatives, created modular components that could be installed without expert help. By morning, he had a new plan. Version 2 of the thermal comfort system used 70% less material. The instructions were simple enough for non-engineers to follow. He included detailed drawings, measurements, and step-by-step guides. Then he did something that confused every supply officer in the sector. He released all of it for free. No patents, no licensing fees. Complete open-source designs that anyone could use, modify, and share. The first orphanage to respond was on a mining station in the Carillion Belt. Their director downloaded the plans, read them overnight, and started building the next day. They sent progress photos, dragons helping install pipes, testing floor temperatures, smiling. Then another orphanage responded. Then 3 more. Word spread through networks that the commission did not monitor. Directors talked to directors. Engineers shared notes. Within 2 weeks, 5 orphanages had started construction using Rick's free designs. The human network helped. Trade ships passing through systems donated materials at cost. Human engineers working on various stations volunteered their time. One ship captain delivered an entire shipment of stone tiles for free just because his daughter had asked him to help the dragon children she saw in the news feeds. Rick coordinated everything from Station Talon 7. He answered questions at all hours, troubleshot problems, modified designs for different station configurations. He slept 4 hours a night and survived on coffee and stubbornness. Owen noticed. You are going to burn out. I am fine. You are helping everyone except yourself. Owen sat beside him at the gathering hearth. The other dragons are worried you will leave us to help other stations. Rick looked at the young dragon. Owen had grown 2 centimeters in a month. His scales shone with health. He looked like a different creature than the defensive, untrusting dragon Rick had met 6 weeks ago. I am not leaving, Rick said. I'm making sure other kids get what you have. There is a difference. But you are here less, working more. We miss you. The simple honesty hit harder than any commission criticism. Rick had been so focused on helping distant orphanages that he had neglected the dragons right in front of him. You are right. I am sorry. He set down his datapad. How about we make this a group project? You help me coordinate the other stations. That way I spend time with you and help them. Owen's eyes brightened. Really? Really? You know the system better than anyone except me. You can explain it to other dragons. Maybe better than I can. The next day, Owen started recording tutorial videos. He explained the heating system in simple terms, showed other dragons how different components worked, talked about what it felt like to have warmth after living without it. The videos were raw, honest, powerful. They went viral. Dragons across the galaxy watched Owen explain how a human engineer had built them a home instead of just a heating system. They heard him describe sleeping in warmth for the first time, saw his scales shine with health. The emotional impact reached places that technical data never could. Adult dragons started paying attention. Many were orphanage survivors themselves. They remembered the cold, the institutional indifference, the feeling of being a problem to solve rather than a child to nurture. They started donating money, materials, and time point one of them was named Sylvia. She was 78 years old and had spent her first 12 years in an orphanage similar to Station Talon 7. She contacted Rick directly. I need to tell my story to the commission, she said. They need to hear what their efficient systems do to children long-term. Rick connected her with Director Ashvin. Together, they compiled data on orphanage survivors. The numbers were devastating. Higher rates of anxiety disorders, difficulty forming relationships, chronic health problems, trust issues. all correlated with inadequate childhood thermal care. Sylvia requested a hearing with the commission. They tried to deny it. She went public. The media pressure forced them to schedule a session. 2 weeks later, Sylvia stood before the same council that had inspected Station Talon 7. She was old and frail, but her voice carried authority. "I survived your efficient system," she said. "Survived, but never thrived. I am 78 years old, and I still cannot sleep in cold rooms. I still have nightmares about huddling for warmth. I still struggle to trust that safe spaces will remain safe." She presented the data Rick and Ashvin had compiled, showed the long-term costs of childhood cold, made it clear that saving money on heating systems meant spending more on adult mental health care. "Invest in warmth now," she concluded, "or pay for trauma treatment forever. Those are your choices." The commission requested a recess to review the data. Sylvia sat down beside Rick in the waiting area. She looked exhausted. "Thank you for doing this," Rick said. "Thank you for giving current children what I never had." She smiled sadly. "Maybe the ones at Station Talon 7 will not grow up like me. Maybe they will sleep peacefully their whole lives." The commission reconvened after 2 hours. Coordinator Vess spoke for the council. After reviewing long-term cost analysis and developmental impact data, the commission has voted to revise thermal standards for all childcare facilities. Funding will be allocated for retrofitting existing orphanages. Engineer Palmer's open-source designs are approved as the recommended template. Rick sat very still. Sylvia gripped his hand tightly. They had won, but the real work was just beginning. 200 orphanages needed help. Rick could not do it alone. He looked at Owen's face on the video screen, explaining warmth to other dragons. He thought about the human volunteers, the trade ships, the network of people who wanted to help. Maybe he did not have to do it alone. Maybe this was always supposed to be bigger than one engineer and one station. Rick named it the Warmth Project. Simple, direct, impossible to misunderstand. The mission statement fit on one line. Every child deserves to feel safe. The volunteer network grew faster than he expected. Engineers from 15 species offered their time. Trade unions donated transportation for materials. Medical professionals provided health assessments. Teachers helped with the educational components. The project became something larger than thermal systems. It became a movement. The training program started small. Rick could not visit 200 orphanages personally, but he could teach others how to build what those orphanages needed. He developed a certification course. 3 weeks of intensive instruction covering thermal engineering, child development, and comfort-based design principles. The first class had 12 students. 6 humans, 3 Dracath adults who had survived orphanages themselves, 2 engineers from species that valued family warmth, and 1 digital consciousness who wanted to understand emotional comfort better. They learned not just how to install heating systems, but why those systems mattered. Owen helped teach. At 12 years old, he became the youngest instructor in the program. He could not explain complex thermodynamics, but he could describe what warmth meant to a cold child better than any adult. His sections on understanding comfort needs were the highest-rated parts of the course. Lila contributed too. She drew pictures of what made her feel safe, showed the before and after of her own alcove, explained in simple words why curved walls felt better than straight ones, why adjustable heat mattered, why having your own space changed everything. The engineers found her input more valuable than technical manuals. The first certified graduates went to work immediately. They spread across the galaxy to orphanages that had requested help. Each one carried Rick's designs, their own skills, and an understanding that this work was about more than construction. Station Talon 7 became the training center. Orphanages sent representatives to see the original installation. They walked through the nursery, touched the warm floors, sat in the gathering hearth. They talked to dragons who had lived through the transformation. The visits were more convincing than any presentation. Director Ashvin coordinated the logistics. He had spent 20 years managing one orphanage. Now he helped manage a network of 200. The work was exhausting. The results made it worthwhile. 6 months after the commission vote, 89 orphanages had implemented thermal comfort systems. 3,000 dragon children now slept in warmth instead of cold. The medical data showed what Rick had promised. Better health, better development, better futures. Other species noticed. Orphanages housing different species started requesting modifications to Rick's designs. Could the system work for avian children who needed different temperature ranges? For aquatic species who required humidity control? For mammals with different comfort needs? Rick modified the designs for each request. The core principle stayed the same. Understand what comfort means to that species, then engineer systems that provide it. Technologies serve the children, not the other way around. The galactic community began to understand what humans brought to childcare. Not superior technology, not greater resources. Understanding, empathy, the knowledge that survival is not enough. Children need more. They need warmth in all its meanings. Rick received offers from corporations wanting to commercialize his designs. He refused them all. The designs stayed open source, free, available to anyone who needed them. Some companies donated funding to the Warmth Project anyway, unable to profit, but still wanting to help. Media attention followed. Reporters visited Station Talon 7. They interviewed Rick, Ashvin, the dragons. The stories spread across networks. Rick declined most interview requests. When he did speak, he kept it simple. I just built what they needed. Any engineer could have done this. They just had to ask the right questions first. The Galactic Council offered him awards. He accepted one, permission to name the new thermal standards. He called them the Lila Standards, after the smallest dragon who had taught him what warmth meant. She cried when she heard. Happy tears. 1 year after Rick first arrived at Station Talon 7, he stood in the nursery watching the current group of dragons. Some were original residents. Some were new arrivals. All of them had warm alcoves, heated floors, and a gathering hearth. None of them knew what it felt like to be cold every day. Owen approached. He was nearly adult-sized now, preparing to leave the orphanage soon. He had been accepted to an engineering academy. His entrance essay had been about thermal systems and the human who taught him that caring was not weakness. What will you do now? Owen asked. The project runs itself mostly. Other engineers are trained. The systems are installed. Rick had been thinking about that. There are other problems, other ways children suffer that engineers ignore. Maybe I will find those next. Wherever you go, remember this. Owen gestured to the nursery. You did not just fix a heating system. You proved that someone cared. That mattered more than the warmth. Lila joined them. She was 6 now, healthy and bright. She had decided she wanted to be an engineer when she grew up. Specifically, she wanted to help other children the way Rick had helped her. Will you come back to visit? She asked. Always. This is home now, too. That evening, Rick sat in the gathering hearth surrounded by dragons. They talked about their days, shared stories, made plans. Normal family things. Warm things. Director Ashvin watched from the doorway. He had spent decades managing cold efficiency. Now he managed warm chaos. The chaos was better than Rick's datapad chimed. Another orphanage requesting help. This one housed a species he had never worked with before. New challenges. New children who needed someone to care. He looked at the dragons around him. At Owen preparing for his future. At Lila drawing designs for her own engineering projects. At 47 children who now knew what safety felt like. The work would never be finished. There would always be more children who needed warmth. More systems that prioritized efficiency over comfort. More bureaucrats who measured everything except what mattered. But there would also always be people willing to fight for better. Engineers who asked the right questions. Volunteers who gave their time. Adults who remembered being cold children and refused to let others suffer the same way. Rick answered the message. He would help the new orphanage. He would teach more engineers. He would keep fighting until every child in the galaxy could sleep warm and safe, because that was what family did. And somewhere along the way, the galaxy's forgotten children had become his family. The gathering hearth glowed steady and warm. Dragons laughed and played and lived. The Warmth Project continued its work. And in 200 orphanages across the stars, children slept peacefully, safe, warm, home.